In this panel, we are revisiting the cypherpunk ethos. We are talking about back to cypherpunk. The moderator of this panel will be Aaron van Wirdum, Rockstar Dev, Juraj Bednár, and Adam Back will be chatting about the cypherpunk ethos. Let's all clap for our panelists.
Hello, Prague. Welcome to the Back to Cypherpunk panel. My name is Wirdum. I'm a journalist. I've been writing about Bitcoin for over 10 years now. I also wrote a book about the origin story of Bitcoin called The Genesis Book. I almost said it wrong myself. The Genesis Book. And in the Genesis Book, so I sort of tell the backstory of Bitcoin, sort of where it all came from. And a big part of the book is about cypherpunk history, so that's what we're going to discuss today. The history of the cypherpunk movement, potentially the future of the cypherpunk movement, what it means for Bitcoin today and indeed in the future. So I'll introduce, the panelists will introduce themselves. Let's start here with Rockstar Dev.
Hey, Rockstar Dev here, core contributor on BTC Pay server. I was also involved with Strike. Hope everyone enjoyed Jack Malver's presentation this morning. And like a cypherpunk inspired by Adam and other cypherpunks who have done phenomenal work over the last few decades. And I look forward to us talking about cypherpunk history and hopefully inspiring some of you in the audience to join us.
Before we move on, real quick, because it's sort of a relevant question on the topic, why do you wear a mask?
So I was hoping we all will be wearing masks. When I was talking with Matthias about this panel, I was like, let's all wear a mask, and also let's have masks for people in the audience, because it's such a simple accessory, but I wear it because of myself. Like, I don't want my public presence in Bitcoin to be related to my private life. And
why not?
Simply, it's much better structured life. Like, I know a lot of people, they want to talk about certain ideas and explore certain ideas in a closed identity. Like, they don't want to become public figures. So yeah, I use it again as a accessory that helps me be like, okay, when I take off this mask, sunglasses, hat, I can go back to my private life and not have it related. So.
Right. Okay, Juraj.
Hi, I'm Juraj. I'm OG cypherpunk from Eastern Europe, so we were kind of a weird people coming out of communist regime and kind of used to surveillance. And we have stumbled on this cypherpunk technology, and we figured out we could write each other messages without anyone looking, and could be anonymous and so on. So I think your question to Rockstar should have been to us why we don't wear a mask. And for me, it's the biggest mistake, I would say, that I revealed my identity, because it's not very good for the cypherpunk and crypto-anarchist strategy.
So if there's new developers, for example, or just new people that want to get involved with Bitcoin, you would recommend that they just stay pseudonymous from the start and wear masks?
I think actually they will slowly get to the point where they don't have a choice. Like, you look at what's happening to developers writing code, they're more and more under attack. Like,
we'll get to that in a bit, but let's first go to Adam.
So I'm Adam. I'm a kind of a applied cryptographer, programmer, and worked in different startups over the years. I was on found the Cypherpunks list in maybe 92, 93, something like that, and got interested in Bitcoin as it announced, and after some time, and then co-founded Blockstream, which is building different Bitcoin technology. So Yeah, like the Cypherpunks list was a very interesting place to talk about the kind of technologies which are now getting mass deployed thanks to Bitcoin.
So who were the cypherpunks and what were their values? And why do you think these values are important or were important? I assume you haven't changed your mind on that?
No, I mean, you've read a lot of the early Cypherpunks posts and sort of found some posts that I'd written like a very long time ago, like 20 years ago, literally, and they look the same. I could have written them yesterday, you know. So no change in viewpoint, very constant on the kind of Cypherpunk mission, and like, you know, how I found the Cypherpunks is I got interested in, I knew about RSA encryption through a friend of mine at university was implementing it, and then PGP came out, and I thought it was such a fascinating and positive thing that this piece of sort of counterintuitive technology, and it would change the balance of power, you know, grant more sovereignty to individuals and reduce the power of the state. And the internet had a bit of that flavor as well. So I thought this is really interesting, and there must be people talking about other things like PGP. So I went to find out, you know, where are these guys hanging out, and that was the Cypherpunks list. And of course, they were talking about many more interesting things like anonymous remailers, pseudonyms, and critically, electronic cash was always viewed as the holy grail, because it was difficult to achieve and because it was very valuable and important part of society to be able to pay for things and conduct commerce online.
Juraj, you also wrote a book on cypherpunk values. How would you summarize the cypherpunk ethos? What does it stand for in your view?
I think it's a strategy to increase personal liberty. And what is kind of hard to understand because it's often compared to philosophy such as anarcho-capitalism or many libertarian movements. And cypherpunk technology and cryptanarchy, they're a strategy to increase liberty today. So it's not like a vision of a society, 50 years in the future, but it's something that you can do now. And there are many ways how you can do that, but I think one of the keys is detaching some of your actions online mostly, but detaching some of your actions or your property and your identity, because your physical body can be put in jail. So if you kind of can achieve this split, and I don't like to use the word privacy because I think anonymity is much stronger word. That's the way how you can actually achieve more liberty today with these technologies.
Right, so achieving liberty through technology rather than through politics, for example, right? That's a summary.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, for me, there are three core principles and ideas when it comes to cypherpunk movement and what it's all about. Like number one, it's all about privacy or anonymity, if you want to go all the way there, through strong cryptography. Like that's number one. Like that's the tool that you use to then enable everything else. Like number two, decentralization, absolutely, going towards breaking up big legacy corrupt systems, like distributing the power, which leads to the third one, which is individual empowerment. What we have seen and we all see is just new technologies, you discover something like that really empowers those that discover it, and then as a result of that, those individuals or entities, they gain power. You look at someone like Google, that how long ago was Google even founded? Like 24 years ago, something like that, 25. And you look at the amount of power that Google has, it's just something insane that should be broken down and distributed to individuals. And this is also how I got into cypherpunks, because when you read the mailing lists that Adam and Juraj have mentioned, it's really insane how well cypherpunks predicted the future and saw all the problems that will, bother us in this actual moment. On the other hand, it is more optimistic than that. It's cypherpunk future, I was just telling to Adam, it is now, it's just not equally distributed. Like someone like me, I have achieved my personal freedom. I have my privacy, so yeah, I can just disappear and like not go to Bitcoin conferences. But the point is that like as many people can do that as I can.
So Bitcoin really comes, you've summarized the cypherpunk ethos pretty well of review. Bitcoin really sort of comes from that culture and from that community. How much of that is still left in Bitcoin? Is this still alive? I mean, people are talking about a lot about ETFs, for example. Is this compatible or is this sort of at odds with each other? And sort of this philosophy of privacy, how strongly is this present still in Bitcoin today? Let's go the other direction.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Bitcoin now, it really depends like which subsection, subculture of Bitcoin you're looking at. So I would say that maybe Cypherpunk is more relevant than ever in the wider community of Bitcoin. I mean, you know, we're here on the panel, people are interested in Cypherpunk. Juraj and Leo organized a great side event a couple nights ago that a lot of you attended. And then like we can even poll the audience, like how many of you here in the audience know Adam before this panel? Can you raise a hand? So you see like a bunch of people, yeah, he's absolute legend. Can we get applause for Adam? Yeah, so I would say, yeah, in the wider community, absolutely. But then what really worries me personally, and this, yeah, my personal stance is when you look at the core of Bitcoin, like which is Bitcoin Core, I don't see many contributors that are Bitcoin Core really interested in that. And we don't have many NIMs contributing to Bitcoin in that sense. So that's something I would like to see addressed. Like I would love if developers are inspired to go in that direction. And especially now that there are amazing nonprofits and there is funding and there is, you know, motivation to fund NIM developers.
So in your view, the current Bitcoin Core culture is not very cypherpunk?
Yeah, I would say that.
Interesting. Do you guys agree? You're right. What's your view?
I think Bitcoin is a very good platform that enables different kind of uses, and I'm happy that people with different values use it. I wouldn't personally buy an ETF or anything like that because it's just contrary to the principles. But as Adam said, the electronic cash use case was kind of the holy grail of Cypherpunk, and it came, or the way people were thinking about it were two things. First, just to be able to send value to each other anonymously, and many people were actually trying to create digital e-cash representations of either fiat or gold, and there was a lot of that back then. And I think the current Bitcoin culture is more about hard money and more about, you know, number go up and we have people cheering it up as an asset. And that was also present. There were a lot of cypherpunks were gold bugs. I was also a gold bug before Bitcoin. But it was not the part that was the core of the strategy that I said, how to increase your personal liberty, because we had encrypted and anonymous communication thanks to PGP, Mixmaster, and later Tor and other protocols. So we could communicate ideas, but we couldn't communicate financially. And Bitcoin brought that. We still have that tool. There is still many ways how you can use it anonymously or with privacy, depending on what you're trying to achieve. But I don't consider it a bad thing that people use it for other things. I don't think everyone needs to be a cypherpunk. Many people have different values and different outlook on life, and I think it's good that that hard money can be brought to grandmas with ETFs, and they deserve to preserve their purchasing power. But I'm very glad that there are also people working on the old kind of cypherpunk e-cash aspect of it.
Yeah, you're right. Just a question for you. Are you upset but by how much me and Adam tweet about MicroStrategy?
No.
You can say yes.
No,
It's okay.
No, I'm okay.
All right, Adam, the cypherpunk ethos is still alive in Bitcoin, or Bitcoin Core specifically. Do you have a view on that? Is it disappearing?
Well, I think that there are people with different views, but I was kind of positively surprised by, I listened to a couple of podcasts where some, kind of core contributors or people who are working on like protocols without coding on core, that actually they had a fairly cypherpunk attitude, so I was positive. But, there are young people with maybe different outlooks who are looking at it more as an open source activity, right? So I guess Rockstar's point, and I've kind of shared his view from time to time, is that it's actually a serious thing to be coding on a piece of technology like this because, for example, with PGP, Phil Zimmerman was under US federal indictment and investigation for years. And so coding on geopolitically hot topics can come with risks, and hence, presumably, we don't know because Satoshi never explained, but presumably that is why he chose to be anonymous because, looking at the PGP example, and also there was another system called eGold, which was a kind of centralized way to pay. They had gold in a vault, and you could pay each other using gold. So, now I think the positive thing is that Bitcoin delivered this electronic cash reality, and you've got to bear in mind the cypherpunks were not a cohesive political viewpoint, right? They would vehemently disagree about all manner of politics and political parties and viewpoints and issues, but they all agreed that Bearer electronic cash was very cool and we must build it, right? So I think that's the point, that electronic cash that you have bearer control of is a useful component to enhance your life. And as Juraj said, the original electronic cash system that was deployed was probably the DigiCash one in the Netherlands, and that was effectively what we would call today a stablecoin. But still, people that were playing with it, and I was one of the people, using it and implementing that protocol in a library, we thought it was very cool because of the privacy and the bearer nature of it, even though it was centralized. And so Bitcoin brings some hard money thinking. And I think at the time, Nick Szabo was probably a bit more on the gold and hard money thinking, but a lot of us were just thinking about bearer electronic cash, which is cool. So Bitcoin, of course, is both an investment asset and bearer electronic cash. And so, in the same way that professional investors would have invested in internet stocks because they could see the internet had potential. With Bitcoin, you can buy Bitcoins. You couldn't buy TCP/IP things, units, right? You could buy domain names, you could, get an IP address, but there's not much you could do. So Bitcoin ends up being both, effectively.
So Rockstar, how should we revive the cypherpunk ethos a bit? Do you think it's disappearing, or it's at least not enough? So what's the strategy to revive it, if that's necessary?
I mean, the way that game theory is set right now, I think we should just continue down this path. And again, thanks to Matthias and Martin for really, setting up this panel and then promoting Cypherpunk. And then Prague is really interesting. You have also Parallel Nipolis here. What Juraj mentioned, this part of the world also, it seems it's very good. It was very good ground for nurturing, cypherpunks, because you come from regimes that are very groupthink, and then you as an individual need to find ways to defend and increase your individual freedom. Then you read the cypherpunk mailing list, start using the tools. So I think we should just keep going forward. And then unfortunately some of the trends that we mentioned, you write a piece of code that's very controversial. There are more and more regulations and laws, unfortunately, being passed that are putting responsibility on developers that write code. I think what will happen is that most developers will then realize I still want to code. I love coding. I love that as a way to express myself, which is what my fellow fellow BTC Pay server contributor and founder of BTC Pay, Nicholas Dorier, had said in his talk, for him as a developer, it's not even about coding for someone else. It's about coding for yourself and then getting to that state of flow. So I think most developers will realize that and then go towards NIMs.
Yeah, so sure. Yeah, so let's move to that topic. So recently, 2 Bitcoin developers were arrested, the Samurai wallet devs. Also in the Ethereum world, the Tornado Cash guys were arrested. So it does seem that Bitcoin privacy tools are genuinely under, state attack at this point in time. What's the best way to fight back? You're saying developers need to be pseudonymous. Juraj, what's the best way to fight back against this?
I agree. I don't think we can outgun the state. So it's not about winning the fight. It's about not participating in the fight. So this is a good strategy. That's the Cypherpunk way how to do it. And I recommend people who want to develop. But it's not only about software. There are many things that need to be done in this space, and there are many services that could be provided. And I think it's best if you use either a pseudonym or be fully anonymous. So not even a pseudonym. You can just come online, share your code or your contribution from a one-time email address or whatever channel you are using, and then disappear. That's also the way. Of course, you don't get this positive feedback. You can't appear on a panel and speak about what you have done, and it's also a part of what is enjoyable about contributing. But
hang on, this is a good point. I want to tie into that. Being pseudonymous sounds easy enough, but if the government is after you, it's probably pretty hard, right? How realistic is this solution really?
Yeah, but you can also have multiple developers using a certain account. There are things like that you can leverage. However, I think at this point, the most I can contribute is not even talk in this panel, but rather send some funds to Samurai Defense Fund, or encourage the rest of you to donate and defend developers, and that's what we can do right now. Long term, I don't know, maybe Adam has more ideas.
Yeah, I'll get to Adam in 1 second. One more thing about it. So the Samurai devs were pseudonymous, although I suppose maybe the tax agents, the tax man who knew who they were.
They were incorporated in the US.
Yeah, okay, right. So they were not pseudonymous in that way, just for the general public, because I never saw them at a conference or anything like that.
Well, yeah, I met them then also when you have investment.
Yeah, right, okay,
there are
fair
other
enough.
stuff.
Adam, how do we fight back? Do we need to fight back? Are you concerned about the recent arrests? What's the way forward here?
Yeah, so I think I'm definitely a fan of pseudonymous or anonymous development, and there actually were examples of that on the Cypherpunk's list before Bitcoin. So there was an electronic cash kind of proof of concept system using Chrome called Magic Money, and the guy's pseudonym was Product Cypher with some numbers and letters. And there were a couple other kind of encryption-related things that were published anonymously. And then I think the other thing that you see playing out is the trade-off between centralized systems and decentralized systems. And so with the file-sharing world, you had BitTorrent, that was decentralized enough that it didn't get shut down ever. And there were other things that were very centralized that got shut down. And so I think we just need more decentralized architectures. And you can see that the Samurai wallet had a central coordinator operated by the company. And now, even though the company's shut down, there's a kind of Hydra effect, right? Where now there are multiple Wasabi-compatible coordinators that have stepped up. So that's the 2 companies. The Samurai that was talked about now is Wasabi, which kind of curtailed business in reaction to the risks, presumably. I haven't explained, but presumably related to the risks they perceived. And so they basically switched to they stopped operating as a corporation. But now, it's open source, and so now there are multiple coordinators run by presumably volunteers on the internet. So that's one approach. And I think an even more robust approach is to be much more decentralized with lesser coordinator, like Join Market and PayJoin, And things like PayJoin are actually, features right in the wallet, and it's supported by BTC Pay Server. So when you have, a peer-to-peer thing which only operates between two people as they're transacting, it's actually very hard for, for example, with file sharing, there's a multi-decade fight where the content distribution industry tried to stop that, and people just kept sharing in the millions. And so, you can't, if there's a company that's sharing, and there were some companies doing content distribution that did get shut down, but they never managed to do anything really to, millions and tens of millions of people sharing. So I think that's the model. And if in a way, Bitcoin itself is architected, it seems, informed by the DigiCash experience, which you had a central thing, it had some very nice properties, but it got shut down. So it's hard to keep centralized things survivable. And so I think you could look at this as another scenario. So definitely pseudonymous developers, but also more decentralized, more peer-to-peer architectures for things which users want that regulators maybe don't want as much.
Right. Well, I want to push back against that a little bit. So all three of you sort of seem in consensus that the solutions are technical. Now, Eric Hughes, of course, one of the co-founders of the Cypherpunks, he wrote the mantra, Cypherpunks write code. Later on, though, he sort of revised that position. He said, code is not enough. You need to also change the public perception that privacy is not a bad thing. Like, people in general need to understand that privacy is a human right, something people should be allowed to do, because otherwise it's still a fringe thing and you could still get in all, kind of trouble. So would you guys agree with that it's not just a technical solution, but you got to also spread the word or, change public opinion about it, and if so, how?
Yeah, I usually love to say that it's the saying is cypherpunks write code, but I go beyond that and say that cypherpunks control information. Like, cryptography is a way to control information. And then as for privacy, I told you in one of our conversations how much I loved when someone tweeted like, oh, privacy is not a human right. You responded like, it literally is. It's in UN chapter, like it's Article 12 from what I think, right?
I don't remember which article, but it's an actual UN
It's
article.
like actual human right. So when it comes to cypherpunk controlling information, you look at maybe most well-known cypherpunks in the last decade as Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. It's not the code that they have written, it's the code they have used and how they have used it. So I would definitely go in that direction, because to me, again, like as someone growing up and then looking up to cypherpunks, it was all about that vision that digital society will just keep producing exponentially more and more and more information. And then there will be people that can handle that information, use the tools, use their, structure in their life to process the information, and there will be people that just can't. And it's up to us as cypherpunks, sure, to write tools, like write code, but also evangelize existing tools. Because in BTC Pay Server documentary that I would encourage everyone to watch, it was released like a month ago, Adam has this great segment where he talks about it's not about politically arguing and this and that. You will do much better to write code that solves the problem and then use that code. But someone also needs to use the code, which is why I say cypherpunks control information.
You're right.
I think that I don't know if privacy is a human right. I don't care much about the charters and whatever. But what I perceive is that privacy is not normal. Normies don't want privacy. They want free shit. They want, Facebook accounts. They don't want to pay for things, and they're willing to trade their privacy for that. But on the other hand, we have many people that are kind of pushed into this cypherpunk thing. They maybe don't even know that it's called a cypherpunk. So for example, when I talk to people like self-employed, people who install solar panels or do some construction work and so on, and I ask them, how is the economy? Like, what is happening? And first of all, they say, okay, economy is shit, there's inflation, people can't afford our services, and then there's so much regulations that we cannot possibly be compliant with it. And they come to it from a completely different perspective. It's not about reading a book on cypherpunk and putting on a mask and encrypting everything. They just realize that this is a strategy that can work for them, and they don't have to be coders, they don't have to be techies. They find out about hard money. They find that they need to initiate and have these interactions in a different way, in a different context. And they realize that this is a strategy and they can use these tools. There are many people who do crowdfunding on BTC Pay server, and they realize now EU is doing regulation on crowdfunding portals, but you can still spawn your BTC Pay server and do crowdfunding. And we have done, I don't know, I've used that module like
for the
25
side
times or something. So I don't think it's about educate, like, we don't need to spread it to everyone. I think what we need is to match that need. If you see that someone would benefit from these strategies and they're open to it, then okay, here you go, here are the tools. If you can contribute, but use it. You know, if you have an employee in a bank earning their salary and they don't give a shit about it, it's like you don't need to preach to them cypherpunk values. They don't need it. So I don't think it's about the mass adoption. I think it's a strategy for people who would find it beneficial.
So Adam, you can sort of talk from experience because there has been another war on privacy in the 90s, the crypto wars. What's the lessons from the first crypto war, if you will? Is there anything to learn from that we can use today?
I mean, it has some similarities in this.
Maybe for the people that don't know, you can give a short
T-shirt.
Aaron is wearing the T-shirt of the event. Yeah. So the US and some other countries were sort of with the advent of the internet and public key cryptography, which is relatively new, but people started to adopt it and implement it in software packages. It turned out that governments weren't keen on individuals communicating with encryption, so they couldn't read it. And there turned out to be actually some laws prohibiting the export of encryption software from the US, and I think France had something like that, and a number of less liberal countries actually outright banned the use of encryption in their jurisdiction. And so it sort of started a bit of a battle because the cypherpunks obviously wanted to use encryption, and companies wanted to use encryption on the internet for e-commerce, you know, for SSL in websites and things. And there's a kind of silly situation where US companies that were making SSL web servers for e-commerce couldn't export them out of the US, or if they did, they had to be weakened so much that they weren't really secure. And so then it just created jobs outside the US to build the same thing. And so just observing that, I actually wrote a very small piece of code to implement some encryption, and Aaron is wearing it on his T-shirt there. It's like small enough to put in to put in an email signature or something like that. And actually, there was a law professor in the US who was, you know, trying to fight these regulations legally, and he submitted the paperwork to ask for an opinion if that code was exportable, and he got the decision, which is no, it's not. Which is kind of ludicrous because you could type it in like a couple of minutes, right? So it showed the silliness of it. And of course, in the US, there's also a precedent of, not banning books, and so people just printed the source code in the book and exported that. Also, they're just trying to like push to reform the law by making a mockery of the silly implications of it, and eventually it was.
So would there be any lessons from that for the Bitcoin today, for example?
Well,
from that whole history?
I mean, I think maybe the big picture view is that if individuals and businesses practically need to do something or want to do something and do it in mass, eventually the regulators catch up. You know, maybe a few decades later or 50 years later, but they can't hold on to an unrealistic position for the long term.
Yeah, if I would have to answer my own question, what I found is that the crypto wars were really won because there were sort of multiple pro-privacy parties fighting it from different directions. So you had the companies like Netscapes that their businesses were hurting. You had the sort of human rights types of organizations like the ACLU, and you had the cypherpunks that were sort of the radical arm, that were just going to do it anyways, that were just going to write the code. And that combination of sort of different interest groups all pushing for the pro-privacy agenda back then, that's, I think, what really won.
And I also think that's what we have now. It's just that now it's the phase, then they fight you. So,
I mean, I think the companies can step it up a bit. They can push back against all these KYC regulations way more than they're doing as far as, or customers can not use these companies. Juraj, you want to add something?
Another cypherpunk called Frank Brown has this saying, technologies lead, politicians just follow. So that's kind of what Adam said. We had a similar experience in Czechoslovakia. So foreign currency dealers were not allowed. They were called backslugs, and you would see them everywhere because people wanted to exchange currencies. And they were successful to the extent that when Czechoslovakia got rid of their communist rulers, the central bank had to go ask the dealers what should be the exchange rate of Czechoslovak crown to Deutsche Mark and other things. So we have the same analogy right now. People like to smoke weed. You can get it anywhere. It's banned. But people want to use it. And I think this is the strategy. I'm not of course there is a political fight that can be won and it can be fought. But what is more important is that if we all use Bitcoin, if we all do it non-KYC, if we all accept Bitcoin to our own wallets, don't use the regulated gateways, if there's so much traction and so much peer-to-peer trade, it's not possible to ban it. It doesn't matter what the regulations is, the same way people just smoke their joints and their only thing is they don't want to be caught. You can buy it anywhere in the world because there's demand. So we are the demand and we need to keep it on. So that's the strategy from the ground up.
Let's go.
Well, okay, so one last question, which ties in with this. So you mentioned, the peer-to-peer usage of Bitcoin versus the KYC usage of Bitcoin. Do you see a future where these two, there's two versions of Bitcoin, there's black Bitcoin, white Bitcoin, is that a plausible sort of scenario? And we have about 2 minutes, so everyone's going to have to keep this short.
For me, it's the Bitcoin is no KYC Bitcoin. KYC Bitcoin is fake, that's not the real thing. And
but you think it's plausible that we could see a sort of split in that sense?
I would love if KYC Bitcoin forked off. Please do it, BlackRock. Let's go.
Juraj? Okay, let's end it with Adam then. Do you see this as a plausible scenario, or maybe it's sort of true already, like a black Bitcoin and a white Bitcoin that kind of trade at different exchange rates, exist next to each other?
Wait. Black Bitcoin and white Bitcoin. Why?
I mean, I think it will get arbitraged because it's kind of like the gray market discussion. You can't really suppress the market ultimately. I mean, I think the other thing is we're looking at current short-term issues. The interesting thing, because the Cypherpunk mission is a very long-term thing that's been going on for 30 years or maybe more, is, where do we expect this to lead? And there is a vision of less government, more self-sovereignty, and so occasionally I'll say that the book Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson is a blueprint for the future, and we're trying to build it with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's a major building block. And basically what that looks like is just, free commerce, less government. Government is basically a forgotten relic in the book. Nobody knows who the president is, nobody cares, there are no taxes. Everything is provided by private industry. So, in the short term you don't see it, but in the long term things evolve. The separation of church and state, and Bitcoin is separation from money from state, and a state without control of the money is a far weaker thing. So, if you look maybe 50 years out, I think things could look a lot more positive and a lot different.
Yeah, our time is up. You want to add something?
Yeah. Applause for Adam. And the Cypherpunk future is now. Yeah, join us. We will be at BTC Pay Server booth. Yeah, come along and talk and join. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Adam, Juraj, Rockstar. Thanks, guys.